My name is Gail Cossette, and I'm going to facilitate this webinar for you about the two basic forms of procurement. Essentially, what you should always keep in mind is 3 bids and a buy. Now let's get started. When you consider procurement, there are 2 questions that should be foremost in your mind. The first is, what do I need? And the second is, do I have the budget to pay for it? Now, I don't know about you, but every week I go grocery shopping for my family, and I ask myself, what do I need? And the second question I ask, do I have the money to pay for it? A key factor to procurement is competition. So if you have 3 businesses telling you they can sell you their product, which is exactly the same, they are now in competition with each other. And this is good for the buyer, which is you. This piece here is very important because competition is not a process or a method of procurement. Rather, it is a condition of the environment in which the procurement occurs. So you want competitive procurement. This is the very essence of procurement, and it's also a legal requirement. Competitive procurement means that all procurement transactions, including small purchases, must be conducted in a manner that maximizes free and open competition. So what is free and open competition? This means that all suppliers are playing on a level playing field and that they have the same opportunity to compete. Procurement procedures must not unduly restrict competition or eliminate competition. So there are 2 basic forms of procurement, informal and formal. So how do you know which one to use? Well, let's first look at the definitions. Informal includes small purchases and formal includes large purchases. They're both based on the small purchase threshold. Now in the digital book, you learned more about thresholds. So the definition for informal procurement is small purchases less than $150,000 in one particular case, whatever the threshold is. Remember, New Hampshire State has not set a threshold. The formal process is larger purchases that are more than or equal to the small threshold. It's important to note that you cannot arbitrarily break down your formal purchases into smaller purchases. However, you can break up your purchases if you have good reason. For example, breaking up your apple purchases from your citrus purchases because there are many more local vendors who can bid on apples, but only 1 or 2 who can bid on both apples and citrus. In this case, you'd be increasing competition in your apple purchase, and this is a good thing. You want competitive procurement. You want competition. And hopefully getting a lower price if you break it up because of the increased competition. Another example is you might need many more carrots in October because you're having a harvest of the month menu, but you don't normally serve a lot of carrots. So in that case, you could separate the carrots that you need just for October into their own purchase, and then conduct a separate procurement process for supplying the rest of your carrots. So let's move into the informal procurement process. The formal and the informal procurement processes have the same basic steps. They each require a drafting of a specification. They both require bidding. They both require evaluation of bidder responses, determine a decision based on the responsive and responsible bidder at the lowest price. They both award a contract, and they both require you to manage the contract to ensure compliance. The major differences really are in here. So with regards to the informal procurement, let's take each step along the way. You're going to draft your specification in writing. These are detailed requirements of the intended agreement, including delivery and packing conditions. You should look at the basic webinar that's been created for specifications in Lesson 1 in the overview, the overall tutorial. And then you have to identify your sources. This is something you do. You can contact potential vendors by visiting farmers markets or calling on the phone or emailing, but you would need to at least have 3 different bids. So when you solicit your bids here, you contract your vendors by phone, fax, email, in person, or mail, and you provide them with the specifications. If you call them on the phone, you can read the specifications to them. However, I would always back it up with documentation. So you can find these prices from online, in catalogs, sales flyers, or at the grocery store, or even farmers market. You can choose which vendors to call or which places to look for prices, as long as you find the magical number of 3. So in the informal procurement method, you approach the vendors. It's important that all the prices are for the same thing, which is listed in your specifications. If you talk to or write to vendors, make sure that you tell each vendor the same requirements. In other words, don't go to one vendor and say you want orange carrots, and another vendor you go to and ask for multicolored carrots. You're going to get a different bid. You also don't want to tell one vendor that you need the produce by Tuesday and tell someone else that it doesn't make any difference what day of the week. So these would be differences in the specifications that could affect the price. So then what you're going to do is you're going to evaluate the bidding responses. Now many of you are already checking prices in several different places before making a purchase, but you're not documenting them. And you need to make sure that you're doing that. You need to also document the bids that come in. Now for smaller school organizations, one suggestion might be to create a shopping list of what you typically purchase in a month. Go on a road trip to at least 3 different grocery stores, chains, or write down the price for each item on the list. If you do this a couple of times a year, let's say fall, spring, or winter, summer, you would satisfy the go out and bid requirement that is required by law. So going through that process would satisfy that need. Just make sure you document everything. Now, when you evaluate the responses, this ensures that responders are responsible and responsive. In accordance with all aspects of the specifications, you want to document each bid, even if it was offered in a face-to-face meeting. So after you've evaluated and you've determined this, you're going to award the contract. And then you're not done because you need to manage the contract to ensure compliance. You need to ensure that the school receives everything from the vendor that the contract stipulates. And so here is formal procurement. Again, the same basic legal requirements. Your specifications, you do a bidding, you evaluate the bidder's response, you determine the most responsive and responsible at the lowest price and award the contract, and you manage the contract. The biggest difference is right here. In a formal procurement process, the bidding is done through competitive sealed bidding that involves first sending out an invitation to bid. This has to be done publicly. So an IFB is issued after a complete and realistic specification has been written and when the contract can be awarded based on price. The public announcement ensures that all potential vendors are aware of the solicitation and the procurement occurs on a competitive basis with all potential vendors on a level playing field. As mentioned before, bids are received, documented, and objectively evaluated. Please note that in a formal procurement process, negotiation of price or terms is not permitted. A firm, fixed price contract is awarded to the responsible and responsive bidder with the lowest price. So it's important to remember, it's a firm, fixed price contract is one in which the award is made a set amount of product at a specific price. Now here is an example of what it might look like if you were to document a bid. This is your vendor, your date received, responsive and responsible, and price per pound. So that ends our webinar. I'd like to thank you for allowing me to facilitate this process for you. Now you can return to the Handbook on Procurement, Lesson 1.